Good evening, Title Tribe. This is Wicked here with the T2T Sports Network, coming to you for T2T Dynasty Live, Episode 6. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of our players that maybe haven't started the year too good and how much panic you should have when it comes to rostering these guys and, maybe what you should be looking to do with them moving forward. And then we'll get into how you overcome injuries throughout the season. I know through these first 2 weeks we've had a couple of pretty big name injuries long term, and so in a dynasty league especially, it can be tough if you don't have the depth already to be able to overcome that. And so we'll give you a few strategies on how you can try to stay alive until your guys get back into the active roster there. And then, as always, we'll be wrapping up our show with our start of the week for week 3. Over here next to me, I got AJ over at AJ_FF Ball. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing pretty good. We're a little tired tonight, but we're gonna push through, do our best here.
So how was week 2 of charting for PFF?
I was just telling Mike that I have spent the last 4 hours or so. I've been charting the special teams for Morehead State versus Montana. So, not the most exciting stuff in the world, but it's all right. I'm enjoying the non-special teams part, and got to do what you got to do to start.
Yeah, from point A to point B, like we talked about, that's what matters,
All right, and then down here below, I got Mike at Dynasty Dog. Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's we're right in the middle of all these injuries, like you mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of, and we're having an episode about panic. So there's a lot of panic out there. So it's kind of glad to be talking about all this tonight. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. So how's everything going with the Dynasty Dogs podcast? What are you guys doing over there lately?
So everything's going good. Last week we had Sam Wise on. That was a great episode. We talked, which is hilarious. We talked about the panic between Will Levis and Bryce Young, and then just several hours later, Bryce Young gets benched for the remainder of the season. And we both kind of said that we weren't really panicking on Bryce, but here we are now. He's no longer playing, so that's hilarious. And this week we're obviously going to be breaking down week 2. Look into week 3, and then everything that goes along with that in regards to Dynasty.
Right on, man. Well, hey, I got my kids here, as you can see, need me for just a second. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Mike. You can give us that first guy that you're panicking about, or maybe you shouldn't be panicking about, and you guys can keep on rolling without me for a few minutes.
Yep, no problem. All right, so this is going to be the guy I am kind of panicking on, and if you followed me for a little bit, this is a guy I've been out on in general, but the reason why I say I'm panicking is because this is a lot of people's consensus top 12 to 15 wide receiver in their dynasty rankings. Somebody who's been very highly talented, and that's going to be wide receiver Chris Olave for the New Orleans Saints. Currently, wide receiver 52. Now, a lot of that has to do with his single-digit week 1. He did have a better week 2. It was 12 points PPR. He had 4 receptions, 81 yards. My biggest fear with him is that this offense is really firing on all cylinders without really getting him involved a whole lot. He's being out-targeted by Rashid Shaheed. Alvin Kamara is on some sort of like CMC type tear right now. He could be really the league winner on that team. And I'm just not seeing it with Olave. I really think if you paid those high-end premium prices for him this offseason, you're probably pretty upset. And I'd be looking to move off of him.
Yeah, to be honest, this Olave is a player that we disagree on in general, because we were going to debate him in the offseason for that episode that we never got to do. But for me, I have Olave as a little bit of a buy low, but I totally get what you're saying. The fact that the Saints offense is doing what it's doing and Olave really hasn't done it much of anything is definitely not the best. Particularly week 1, Olave wasn't really involved at all. The one thing I will say is last week, even though he didn't have a crazy game, just 4 catches for 80 yards, but Derek Carr only attempted 16 passes. Olave had like a 40% target share. So I do think in that sense, things are maybe looking up a little bit from last week. But if you were previously not high on Olave, then I get him being a guy you'd panic on.
It's just the thing that I kind of mentioned. Everything is firing on all cylinders on that offense, and he hasn't been super effective just yet. Now, I mean, Derek Carr, believe it or not, I didn't see this coming. He looks like an MVP candidate right now. And they've beaten two. They played the Cowboys last week. The week before, who was it? I'm blanking.
I believe it was the Panthers.
Oh, well, that's not a very good defense. But the Dallas Cowboys defense is good. So it's just surprising they were able to put such a whooping on them. And I'm not throwing shade at you here, Wicked, for.
Well, the Cowboys defense is good as long as they're not facing a Shanahan-style offense. And that's what the Saints are running this year. And it's very effective. They got a
new OC, right?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And he's a Shanahan disciple, and he runs that style of offense. And Dallas always struggles with those teams that run that offense, like the 49ers, who have absolutely crushed them over the past few years. As far as Olave goes, I would agree with AJ that he's maybe a buy low candidate right now because people are probably panicking on him a little bit. I still think that he's talented. I think this offense is much improved as a whole from last year, and that's going to really benefit Olave. And they're not always going to be up so big every single week. And so Carr is going to have to throw the ball a little bit more some of these weeks that are coming up, and that's going to increase the opportunity for Olave. I mean, Olave was a yard short of scoring a touchdown last week. I mean, if he gets into the end zone right there, nobody's talking about panicking on Olave. So I think just a little bit of patience with Olave will be in your best interest.
I mean, in fairness, I lost a week because Saquon Barkley dropped the ball. So I don't really want to fucking hear any of that.
We'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
Let's just run through this comment here real quick because I know that none of these guys are on our list for this evening. But I know that especially with guys like Pittman and Dell, who were very high up people's boards, thought we're going to have big years, we're very excited about, did not come out of the gates very strong. I think with the Houston offense, there's just so many people in that offense now to get the ball to that it's going to be tough to roster any of them consistently and for them to produce on a week-to-week basis. For Pittman, I think what's holding him back is Richardson is he was always a developmental passer, freak athlete, but needed work as a quarterback. And so I just think that Pittman is, feeling a little bit of that just because AR can't really get the ball accurately and on time on a lot of these plays. For Swift, I would say I'm worried, mostly because that Bears offense looks like a total disaster. It looks like there's not an adult in the room running the offense. It kind of just looks like they go out there and they run around. There's no coordination. They're unorganized. They're definitely not in sync with each other. I don't know what they were practicing all offseason, but it wasn't offense. So I am worried about Swift because I'm worried about that offense altogether. And then for Kelsey, if you have Kelsey on your dynasty roster, you probably either are a contender that bought him over the offseason or you are a dynasty manager that's probably had him for a long time. And I think Kelsey's going to get his this year. And if he's on your roster right now, you're probably just riding with him until he calls it a day.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
So with Pittman, I actually think he is a very solid buy low candidate at this point because I do think Anthony Richardson and this Shane Steichen offense is going to benefit extremely when Josh Downs hopefully plays this week, to be honest, because I think that'll make things a little bit easier for Anthony Richardson as a whole because of Downs being able to get up or get open early and often, and then that opens things up for Pittman. Right now, they have a lot of guys that are vertical threats, Mitchell, Pierce, Pittman. So it's kind of like you're running all verticals at this point. But a guy I really want to talk about that, if you have him on your roster, like you mentioned, DeAndre Swift, after this week could be the big week to move on from Swift. They take on, actually, speaking of Michael Pittman, the Indianapolis Colts, who have given up 36 and 22 to starting running backs these past 2 weeks. So this could be a nice bounce back week for Swift. And as soon as that happens, I'm ready to move off because people are going to probably being back to interested.
Yeah. For me, Swift is somebody that if I don't own him anywhere, but if I did, I would be trying to get off of him immediately. The Bears offense is just terrible. The interior of the offensive line is a disaster, and I just don't think Swift's a very good running back, to be honest. I agree. He's never had good vision. He's just never improved since he's gotten into the NFL. He's a good player in space, but that's really all he can do. Kelsey, I don't really think there's much you can do with him, to be honest. If you're selling him, you're not going to get much for him at this point. If your whole team has fallen apart and he's on it and you're just ready to rebuild already, then I guess you could try and sell him. But if you're still looking to contend for this year, I don't think there's much you can do with him. Pittman, I kind of feel similarly. I'm a little lower on him than probably some other people. Tank Dell, I consider a buy in Dynasty particularly because one, Diggs is not going to be there forever, and two, I think he's going to get targets. He's going to get targets downfield, so he doesn't need a ton of touches to put up fantasy points. And I mean, if he had those two plays, particularly the one could have been a long touchdown if he had brought that ball in on Sunday night against the Bears. And if he catches that, the narrative around him is probably much different. So Dell I like as somebody to buy, but yeah.
My fear with Dell was just basically Diggs just being in the way because they kind of play similarly than than Nico Collins does compared to those two. But again, I agree, Diggs is not going to be there forever.
Yeah, I think Diggs has mostly been sort of the underneath guy so far, whereas Tank is more of a vertical threat. But yeah, him and Stroud just haven't really connected. I mean, so far this year he's only got 4 catches on 11 targets. But that's not going to stay that way. Him and Stroud are both too good for that to continue, I think.
All right, AJ, why don't you just keep us rolling here with your panic meter guy of this week?
Yeah, I did think about going with Swift, so I'm glad that we talked about him. But I'm gonna say Will Levis. He's somebody I've been out on him since he was drafted, and he hasn't done anything to change my mind yet, and he's gotten off to a really poor start this year. I do think people will be able to still talk themselves into him based on the fact that Hopkins has been on a snap count, and they've played 2 pretty good defenses. The Jets are a great defense, and then the Bears have been improved. So I think that leaves you with still a window to sell, because again, people can talk themselves into that. But the way he's played, I mean, he's looked really bad. He's got, I want to say the 3rd lowest PFF passing grade in the NFL. And he, if you've heard Brian Callahan's post-game press conferences, that man hates Will Levis. So yeah. I think the Titans are probably a candidate to move on to a new quarterback next year, whether it's through the draft or however else. So do you
think they even wait till next year? I think he keeps his job this season.
Probably for most of maybe towards the end of the season if the team is still in contention and he's just really holding them back. But I think they'll probably ride out with them. I don't even know who their backup is actually.
Mason Rudolph.
Tannehill's a free agent.
I can't
think they do that.
Back. That would be funny.
Yes. Levis had one of the worst plays by a quarterback I think I've ever seen in week 1 when he was falling down and did his little backhanded flip for a pick 6.
The surrender cobra mid-play.
Yeah, and then he followed that up in week 2 by doing the exact same thing, which prompted his coach to walk out onto the field with his hands up. What the fuck are you doing?
I think Will Levis is just a little too. I don't think all the wires connect in his head. He's just too prone to do stuff like that. He's done it his whole career.
Yeah,
but gone back to college as well.
All right. So my panic guy of the week is going to be running back Rachaad White, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was a guy that I have not been very high on. Even last year, he finished as a top 5 running back in 2023, but it wasn't because he was a very good running back. He got basically every running back snap in that offense last year. He had no competition. He is a good, I would say he's a good outlet pass catcher, but I don't feel like he's very dynamic. He's definitely not an efficient runner at all. Through the first 2 weeks of the season, he's averaging like less than 2 yards per carry.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it like 2.1 and like 2.4 or something like that this past 2 weeks?
It's been atrocious.
Yeah.
And they brought in Bucky Irving this offseason, and I think that he's looked better. I think he's looked. I'm not saying he's looked awesome, but I think he's looked better than Rachaad White, at least to the point where a conversation has to be had on snap share between the two of them. And now White is dealing with a groin injury on top of the fact that I think he was losing his lead on the depth chart already. Now he's hurt, which is at the very least going to hamper his athleticism further and probably diminish his production even more, which just opens the door for more Bucky carries and more Bucky snaps. I just think that, this was a running back who had a Cinderella type fantasy season last year, finishing so high while also being so inefficient. And we see pretty consistently that those types of running backs do not produce year over year and typically lose their value very, very quickly. I think Rachaad White's peak value was near the end of last season, and it's going to just keep coming down the rest of the year here. So I would not, in my opinion, this is your panic meter should be high, and you should be trying to sell him before his value tanks even farther.
Agreed. Completely agree with that one.
I'm with you. The one thing I will say, this isn't, I guess, in defense of Rachaad White, but also points to why he should be sold at this point, is the offensive line just hasn't gotten any better. Rachaad White this season has 49 rushing yards and 50 rushing yards after contact.
That's pretty bad.
Yes, I mean, and I do also think that like a little bit of that is like shows his just lack of vision and feel for running between the tackles.
Yeah, I was going to say my argument to that is Bucky Irving is also playing behind the same offensive line and has looked better.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I mostly just thought that was a funny stat.
I imagine you don't see that one very often. All right, guys. So let's start moving into what we can do in our dynasty leagues when we just get absolutely hammered by injuries. We've had a lot of pretty big name guys go down early in the year here. Tua had that scary concussion last week. He's on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 games. I think he should probably retire. I'm sure everybody who loves him probably thinks he should retire. I don't think his competitive spirit will allow that, but it's stuff like that happens so fast. And even some of these guys that aren't going to be out, like I know Joe Mixon hurt his ankle, came back in the game. He looked okay. He looked great in week 1. Is he going to look bad in week 3 playing on a hurt ankle? A lot of these guys, they'll play through these injuries, but it does affect their ability to produce at a high level. And in a dynasty league, it's really tough because most of the time when somebody goes down with an injury in a dynasty league, their backup's already on somebody's roster. And so that can be difficult to compensate for that injury. So, Mike, what is your approach to, kind of resetting your team? Or let's look at this through the lens of a contender who had a few key injuries. You're really hurting. How do you stay in the game long enough for your guys to come back and squeak into the playoffs?
So obviously the waiver wire, I think that's a great tool, but you did mention one that, a lot of these guys on deep leagues are pretty much gone at this point. The other thing is do not overspend in fab on backup players. Today, I saw someone in one of my leagues spent all $200 in fab on Kareem Hunt. That is a big mistake, in my opinion. So that is definitely something I'd be wary of. Don't overspend, especially with the amount of injuries we've had already. I'm sure we're not done yet. So you're going to need some waiver
There's
money.
going to be another running back that pops up eventually.
Exactly. And this is also what we talked about in the first episode that we did, where we were talking about the rookie drafts and drafting for best player available and not drafting for need, because this is about the time you should be trading for need when these things start to happen. Go out and acquire guys like that are pretty much low right now on the totem pole. Like Ezekiel Elliott might be worth like a third or a fourth, but he's the starter right now for the most part. I do think he's getting most of the touches in Dallas. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
it's about a 50-50 between. Well, Zeke's getting more touches, but he's still only getting about 50%.
So see, that's a guy you could get super cheap that essentially is just paying like $5 in your waiver. It's the same thing as giving up late third, fourth round pick for a guy like that. So I would be looking for dudes like that who are super cheap. We're going to get you through a year. Joe Mixon, he just got hurt. That's not really going to be one. And Alvin Kamara is out of the question now. I'm trying to think of more guys that you could try to go out and acquire, like a Zeke. I'm just blanking right now.
What about you, AJ? How do you like to attack when your injuries are plaguing your team?
Yeah, so I know this doesn't really help anybody at this point, but I think the best way to do it is like you have to prepare before the season starts and before the injuries pile up. The big thing I think like going into a season is to, with like the bottom of your roster, prioritize backup running backs very heavily over like roster clogging receivers. Like for example, like a guy like Jordan Mason prior to before the season, or even like in the offseason before it was really even known that he was like fully the backup over Mitchell and before Mitchell got hurt. Like you can pick up guys like that as opposed to receivers like Darius Slayton or like those kind of guys who are going to score like 5 to 8 points probably a game. And like they're maybe like, I get why they're on rosters, but that's just like, there's no upside there. Like that's not really going to do anything for you. Whereas if you fall into having Jordan Mason just sitting on your bench, like that can change your season. So like really prioritize backup running backs. One person who is still on waivers in a lot of leagues, but I don't really understand is Trey Sermon. Like he is just fully Jonathan Taylor's backup. And I think that if Jonathan Taylor went down, he would probably take a good chunk of the carries. So players like that are really important. I think for me with the trades, I take a little bit of a different approach generally than what Mike just laid out and because I think a lot of times we can try and go into the bargain bin like that for trades and get veterans, and then they just don't really end up filling that much of a hole for you. Like you can get a guy like Zeke, and like maybe that'll help you if he gets some touchdowns, but he can also have games where he's like 15 carries for 31 yards and like 2 catches, and you're like, okay. So like I like to be aggressive with trades and make a bigger trade that you would already make regardless of the injuries, like going and getting like like say you're interested in trading for Travis Etienne, for example. Like that's not obviously like just an injury fill-in, but that'll bolster your team for the rest of the year, even when your guys come back, and for next year. And like it's a trade you already would have done, but maybe be more aggressive with those type of deals once the injuries start hitting.
How do you feel about trading your injured guy? So like, let's say you've got CMC or you've got Pacheco, these guys that are, they're going to be down for a while, but when they come back and then moving forward into future years, they're going to be good producers. But maybe you're a contender and Pacheco being out for 8 weeks is really going to hurt your chances. Are you interested in maybe trading Pacheco for another similarly talented player? You're going to be giving a bit of a discount because Pacheco's injured. But is that a worthwhile endeavor?
I would say, yeah, depending on who. Like, I don't know if I would give up CMC.
Yeah, I agree. Like with CMC, he should be back like fairly soon, I think. who knows? But so I would like someone like that. I would probably not do that with, but Pacheco, I would be more inclined to, just as long as you're not giving up too much of a discount.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I just want to attack the waiver wire aggressively if somebody actually does end up popping up into the lineup. So if somebody comes available that is, a long-term like let's say somebody goes on IR and that as long as this running back stays healthy, he's going to get, like, let's say CMC was done for the year and Jordan Mason was on your waiver. I'm gonna go drop as much money as I can to grab that dude because I'm confident that he is going to be somebody I can plug into my lineup confidently all year long. But I'm not going to go do that for Kareem Hunt because is Kareem Hunt going to be the guy in Kansas City for the next 8 weeks? Probably not. Is Carson Steele? Probably not. Is Samaje Perine? Probably not. You have to take these by case basis. But when somebody does come into the waiver wire that you think can be a real asset for a long period of time, don't be afraid to unload the clip.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to hold my waiver money for quarterbacks in Dynasty. When you have like something like Bryce, yeah, like I just picked up Andy Dalton in like practically every league that I'm in. But yeah, no, if a player like Jordan Mason or like a full handcuff that like will get the same level of volume that the starter did, then that's a no-brainer to be aggressive on.
Right on. All right, guys. Well, let's get into our week 3 starts of the week. I'm going to step out for one more quick minute, so I'll let you guys get started. AJ, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah. Well, Mike stole mine in the doc. I went to I had thought about it, who I was going to do for it, and then I went to check the doc, and you had already wrote him down. But so I pivoted. I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson. It's a guy who probably most people, probably even after week 1, or if not, then after last week, have taken out of their lineups and are looking for other options, which is super fair. But with Bryce Young being benched, I think, like, it's sad to say, but I think that Andy Dalton is going to be like a legitimately very big upgrade over Bryce Young. And that's not to say that Andy Dalton's a great quarterback or anything, but I think that Bryce Young so far this year and at times last year was like legitimately just like not a playable real quarterback, unfortunately. And I think Andy Dalton is just going to inject new life. Just having like a veteran who knows how to run an offense in the room is going to bolster everything. So the Panthers' offensive line this year is, according on PFF's grades, is the fifth highest graded pass blocking unit in the NFL, and Bryce Young has still struggled so much behind them. So I think that going behind what has been a pretty solid pass blocking offensive line, Andy Dalton should do well. And last year, Andy Dalton got one start when I think Bryce Young got hurt, and he threw for 360 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Adam Thielen was the wide receiver 5 that week. I think probably that'll be like if somebody's going to be the target hog now, it'll be Johnson rather than Thielen. But yeah, I would, as much as it might, people might be a little skeeved off by the first couple weeks. I think I would, for one more week, keep Deontay in my starting lineup.
Yeah, I agree. Deontay was somebody that I thought about, or I have tried or did get a few pieces of in the offseason, because I honestly thought Bryce would look better. Now, I didn't see top 12 or top 15, but like maybe 17 to 18 fantasy finish, something like that. And I thought Deontay was going to be the biggest beneficiary of that, as like that younger Adam Thielen role that was last year. So I do think, they needed try something else out, because it wasn't working with Bryce right now. That doesn't mean Bryce is completely done just yet. It's not. I'm trying to live out hope for the dude, because it kind of sucks. Like, to be honest, this team's not going to win. So what's the point of even trying to trot Andy Dalton out there?
Yeah. So I'm curious what you two think. Do you think that benching him was the wrong decision?
No.
Or you thought it was the right decision?
But I wasn't the biggest Bryce fan to begin with. I thought that he was going to struggle a lot in the NFL. coupled with the fact that I had zero faith in the Panthers to be a legitimate NFL team. This is kind of the trajectory I expected from him. Now, though, on top of what I believe to be his skill limitations, he's also got no confidence. And you can't play quarterback in the NFL with no confidence. I don't care how good you are.
Or overly confident like Will Levis.
Yeah, there's a line for sure. But he just looks like a quarterback that is overwhelmed, underskilled, confused, panicking. And he just has no belief in himself, his weapons, his offense, his coaching staff, the play calls. He just looks like he's out there on an island by himself on every play. And so maybe you can circle back to him later, but I don't. If I'm the Panthers and Bryce Young, I think that they need to. I think they've come to the decision that relationship isn't going to work out, and maybe bench him and try to find a trade partner later on in the year or off season if they can't find anybody now. But I think that the Bryce Young experience in Carolina should be over. I don't even if they sit him for the year and he comes back next off season and they name him the starter again, I think he's still going to struggle, and it's just going to be same old song and dance.
Yeah, I'm kind of like 50-50 on it. Just because, one, you mortgaged your entire future to acquire this player, and it's only been 1 year and 2 games so far, and then you guys are not anywhere close to being a competitive team. So what is the point of trotting out Andy Dalton? Now, if you end up sucking with Bryce Young and you have to, rethink things at the end of the year, then by all means move off of him. But what does Andy Dalton do for you at this point?
So my thinking with it and why I think it is the right move to bench him, and I liked Bryce Young as a prospect. But like you watch him now, the stuff that he did well at Alabama and the stuff that even people who like his detractors would think, like there are things that you think he's going to be able to do this in the NFL at least like pretty well. Like they're just gone. Like he's the off script stuff, the throw, like out of pocket on the run throws, he's missing every one of them. There's no pocket management, any of that stuff. And the reason I think you have to bench him is because how do you look like all these 30-year-old NFL veterans in the face and tell them like, yeah, we're trotting out this like non-functional quarterback. Everybody has to go like put their health on the line to try and win football games with this guy playing quarterback, and we have no chance of winning with this guy under center as of now. I just think you have like at a certain point, like they would have lost the locker room if it stayed like this. You have to do something to, especially as a new coach who has no ties to the current quarterback. I just don't think they had much of a choice, but it's sad to see. I was rooting for Bryce.
All right, Mike, who's going to be your start of the week?
So I actually have 2 of them because one of them, if T. Higgins comes back, it kind of cancels out a little bit. But my first one is going to be Andre Yoshivash, or Yoshi. I'm probably just going to call him that because it's a lot easier to say. This dude has played 100% of the snaps in the first week, 77% snaps in the second week. And he did more with the 77% of the snaps in week 2 than he did in week 1. 4 targets, 2 catches. The reason why I like him so much right now is he seems to be the red zone threat for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that is something I want a part of because the Bengals are going to get up and down the field, whether they do it, to Chase or Yoshivas or Kaseki or whoever. They're getting down the field one way or another. He had 2 receptions in the end or in the red zone last week, both for touchdowns. So I want a piece of that, and especially with the snap share he's getting right now. If T. Higgins comes back, obviously that's going to put a damper on him slightly. But he's also like surprisingly out-snapping Jermaine Burton, and AJ and myself were both pretty high on Burton.
I was as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did a whole rookie shows, Wicked. We know this by now. But, he and I were both pretty high on Burton. It just haven't worked out. And Yoshivash has stepped in pretty nicely as a wide receiver, too, in Cincinnati. He probably is going to end up, if You think T comes back? Anybody off topic? Do you think T comes back soon, or do you think
better, man? I hate that guy. I drafted so much of him like 2 years ago or whenever it was, and he's just been nothing but pain and disappointment. I hope he comes back. I don't know though.
I'd rather see him wait until he's very ready than to be like almost there, come back, re-injure it. It's a hamstring, right?
Yes, that's what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather him just be 100%, even if it takes another week or two. Like just get that hamstring right, and let's not be questionable or a game time decision every week for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just the one thing I'll add with Josephus is I think he's a great red zone threat, and like he'll probably he's going to get those red zone targets if the defense is going to pay all their attention to Chase in the red zone because he's such a good ball winner. The one thing I'll say though is Jermaine Burton. Now, week 1 he only played a single snap. Last week he did play. He played 9 passing snaps. He ran 9 routes. So I think that's the dip that you saw with how I don't know how to say his name. Yoshi played 100% of the snaps in week 1, and then that went down to 70 whatever in week 2. I think that's them hopefully getting Burton a little more involved. So I would watch out for that. If that goes up again, then maybe that's a cause for concern. But if he's getting the same like 75% snap share, then I think that's a good call.
Yeah, I'm very interested in Yoshi. My second guy is going to be Khalil Shakir, kind of just because he has a very safe floor of around 12 to 14 points in my opinion, and he's going up against a team in Jacksonville who has not been very good in the secondary, which is good for Shakir, good for the Buffalo Bills. That offense has been okay. It's mostly, Josh Allen putting the team on his back pretty much. And the defense has been solid, but Khalil Shakir is their primary slot guy. And last week I did some digging. Jerry Jeudy was 42% of the snaps in for Cleveland last week against Jacksonville, and he had one of his best games in quite some time. So I could see a very similar output for Khalil Shakir this week against Jacksonville.
Yeah, I love that one. That's the one that I was gonna do that you stole from me. So I'm all on board the Khalil Shakir train.
He's a very underrated football player, in my opinion.
He's the best. I love it.
He's got a good rapport with Josh Allen as well, and that's important. He
catches he has caught every single target that's been thrown.
Literally every single target. That was actually another point I had.
And last year I think he led the NFL in catch percentage. He's awesome. I'm a big fan.
He's just a scrappy dude in general too.
Tough, great after the catch. And last week he had, you look at his numbers, 5 targets, 5 catches, only 54 yards. That's a solid game. But he only ran 17 routes because they were killing the Dolphins so early that they just stopped throwing the ball, and they were dominating on the ground. But 5 targets on 17 routes is pretty darn good.
Yeah. Not only that, it's like his yards per attempt or yards per target's around a first down. 10 and a half week 2, 14 in week 1. So that's something you want on your team as well.
All right, Mike, this is your guy. So are we starting Yoshi over DJ Moore?
No, I can't do that. That
would be very aggressive.
That would be very aggressive. There is a bit of a stink on the Chicago Bears offense. Obviously, we just talked about it with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
But let's be real here. DJ Moore has done it with every single quarterback you could possibly imagine.
He was a Panther.
Yeah, he was a Panther.
He produced as a Panther.
He produced with Justin Fields. He's been a wide receiver too in this league. Almost, I believe, every single year of his career in the NFL. I can't see people being this upset with that dude. That dude can ball.
Yeah, DJ Moore is bad offense proof.
Mm-hmm. And I think they'll get it in shape at some point.
Well, it can't get much worse. It's been so hard to watch.
Just the design of the offense is just viable.
They look out of sorts, confused. It looks like they're just winging it. Like they all just get in the huddle, and you know how when you were a kid, you just draw the routes on the football, and then you'd break the huddle and go run the play. That's kind of what it looks like they're doing. There's no system in place right now, and I don't know. Is Caleb Williams not in tune with the playbook yet, or is that part of the problem? I don't know, but it doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's not only that. Like he did this last year with Justin Fields, Matt Eberflus I'm talking about, and now he's doing it again with Caleb, where both of them are struggling. And you know, Justin Fields has looked semi-respectable.
He's looked like a real quarterback.
Yeah, which is just like, does that make it seem like it's Matt Eberflus? Because it does to me. I
think it's Shane Waldron rather than Eberflus isn't really involved with the offense too much, I don't think. Shane I could have a whole podcast on why I don't like Shane Waldron, but
JSN already did that for you.
Yeah, I mean JSN, he warned us of this. I tweeted this. I tweeted a clip out the other day of it's just one play, but it sums things up pretty well. They ran a screen pass to the left side to Gerald Everett with Rome Odunze and DeAndre Carter lead blocking for Gerald Everett. What's the thought process there? We've got a little guy who runs super fast, and we've got our number 9 overall pick, stud wide receiver, and let's go have him block for 45-year-old Gerald Everett.
Don't they have Mercedes Lewis too, or is that the Green Bay Packers?
They do have Mercedes Lewis, and let me tell you, if Mercedes Lewis is on the field, they are running the ball. It's just.
Oh man! All right, guys. So my start of the week, if you'd asked me who this player was a few weeks ago, I would not have been able to tell you. I'm not afraid to admit that Jalen Nailor of the Minnesota Vikings eluded me in the preseason and in my offseason process. This guy was 100% off of my radar. But with Addison out last week, Nailor played 93% of the Vikings' offensive snaps. He caught 3 of 4 targets for 54 yards and a touchdown. That is a very respectable line for a next man up wide receiver. I don't know if Addison's going to play this week. I believe he's listed as questionable, but as of today, he hasn't practiced. I think that if Addison plays, I would be surprised if he's not on a snap count because he did injure his ankle in the off season and then re-aggravated it in the that week 1 game. And so I think that they're going to ease him back in if he does play this week. If he is suiting up, maybe that, pump the brakes on Nailor a little bit, but I liked what I saw from him. I thought that he went out there and he functioned as a very good wide receiver too. When you got Justin Jefferson on the field, and it sounds like he's going to play, it makes the other receivers' job so much easier because the entire secondary is focused on Justin Jefferson. And so you typically just have to go out there and win against one defensive back. And I think that Sam Darnold has impressed over the first 2 weeks. At least he's impressed me. He's looked more than capable of running this offense and getting these weapons involved. So I think that Nailor is a solid start this week. Maybe if you're a team that's dealing with some of those injuries like we talked about last week, Nailor's probably a guy that you were able to pick up off your waiver wire. In some leagues, he might even still be there. I probably not, but it's worth a check. And he's somebody that I would feel comfortable throwing into my flex spot if I'm in need this week and feeling okay about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if I'm not mistaken, he has been on the Vikings for a long time, or at least for a couple years. Not a long time, but a couple years.
Third year.
And he's been with the Vikings the whole time. So that's extremely positive, especially because he knows the system. He's going to be familiar with the play calling. So it's not something you have to, it's not a guy they picked up off the street to come in and play wide receiver. This is a dude who's familiar with that team. So I like that.
Yeah. I love Jalen Naylor. I saw that on the show sheet, and I got excited. He at Michigan State, he in 2020, so the COVID year, it was a shortened season, so they only played 7 games. But him and Jaden Reed were the 2 receivers there. It was both their 3rd years in college, and Jalen Naylor outproduced Jaden Reed in the same offense. Had put up 500 yards in 7 games to Jaden Reed's 400. So I love Jalen Naylor. I'm a big fan.
Was Keon Coleman on that team too?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
Or at least he might have been like a freshman and not really involved. But I don't know if you saw in on Justin Jefferson's 97-yard touchdown, Jalen Naylor was also running wide open going the other direction, and he very easily could have had that 97-yard touchdown for himself. But yeah, no,
I've been impressed with what I saw from him. He was my I also for T2T I do the write-ups for the weekly waiver wire episode for the Patreon subscribers. I do the wide receivers for that, and Naylor was one of my pickups that I recommended to people. This is in your redraft leagues, obviously, but he was owned in 0.5% of leagues, and I guarantee you that somebody can use him on their roster.
I wonder what he is in Dynasty. I'm going to look that up real quick.
One of our Toilets to Titles Dynasty leagues, I had him in the offseason, and I cut him when we dropped the roster spots down, and then somebody else picked him up after I dropped him.
So he's currently, it went up 18%, I guess, from this week, obviously. He's at 64% ownership in Dynasty.
Yeah, so he's still out there in a lot of leagues. And I think that if you are in, say, 12-team league plus with any sort of large bench, medium to large bench sizes, he's probably somebody that's worth a spot over some of these other guys at the bottom of your roster. I think that Jefferson and Addison both have now had lower body injuries to start the season. Addison's is especially concerning long-term because we see those ankles get re-aggravated all the time. And Naylor's obviously the guy that they want stepping in if somebody goes down. So
it's probably because he's been stepping on that. He's been stepping on that gas pedal too hard.
Yeah.
Probably what it is.
With Naylor too, any piece of the Vikings, I think that you can get, I would be doing that, because I think Kevin O'Connell has proved himself to be like one of the elite coaches in the NFL. I'm very high on what they're doing over there.
Isn't it crazy to think that we are looking at a season where right now Sam Darnold and Derek Carr are at the top of the fantasy points? It is absolutely wild.
Coordinator does.
I'm sick to my stomach.
Scheme and good weapons can make you a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, so to close out the show, this idea came to me because I'm a Cowboys fan. And last Sunday, I had to sit through 3 hours of ass whooping watching the Cowboys play the Saints. And that felt terrible. And then on Monday night, I watched the Eagles absolutely give a game away to the Atlanta Falcons. And I thought to myself, I think I'd rather get blown out than lose like this. And so that prompted the question, would you rather your team just get absolutely decimated from whistle to whistle, or just absolutely choke the game away and lose in heartbreaking fashion in the final seconds?
I would rather just get beat down, because sometimes a team just has your number. That just happens. But losing in a close game and the way it happened is just super frustrating to watch. And then the most annoying thing is the overreactions that happen afterwards with those kind of things. Like I said, with an ass whooping, it's kind of just like, they really just were the better team. Something happened and we just got beat down. It happens. But with a close loss where Saquon Barkley drops the ball on a play he probably makes 9 out of 10 times is just ridiculous. I hate it. I hate everything.
I'll be the devil's advocate on this one. Two things, well, a couple things. So one, it kind of depends on like what the situation is and what you're talking about. If it's like early in the season like this, I would rather see my team play well or at least like be competitive and lose a close game than get blown out. Because if you get like blown out early in the season, like, and you have such a small sample size of games, you're like, oh man, like you lose all hope practically for the season. Whereas like if you're an Eagles fan, you can be like, well, like we win that game 99 times out of 100. Like Saquon catches that pass 99 times out of 100. Like that doesn't bring you concern going forward, I think, as much as like I'd lost like the Cowboys one against the Saints.
Well, that's because you don't live in Philadelphia, and the amount of shit I have heard the past since Monday night has just been asinine. But sorry, it's frustrating.
You're right. The people overreact to stuff like that. But yeah, I err on the side of also the other thing is at least like Mike as an Eagles fan got 3 hours of entertainment when he sat down and was like, this is a good game. I'm watching my team play football. Whereas like you're a Cowboys fan, you sit down and it is just
Sadness.
3 entire hours of torture. Like there's no ups and downs or whatever. It's just all bad.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like would you rather your team be like like always kind of competing but never like a real Super Bowl contender, or just like be a terrible team? Like I'm kind of on the side of I'd rather play in like somewhat meaningful games and just not win a Super Bowl than like none of the games matter at all and I borderline want my own team to lose. But that's, I guess, just a difference of philosophy there.
Yeah. Those close losses, or those losses where you feel like you really should have won the game, I don't know, there's just something about them for me that stings a little different.
No,
watching Kirk Cousins pick us apart with a minute something left, it was just who looked like shit the entire game, and then all of a sudden just turned into prime Kirk Cousins again.
I wonder if he was just in that moment, like the adrenaline was pumping and he just wasn't even thinking about the Achilles, or like if he was previously, like thinking about it too much or whatever, and then he just started letting things rip.
So I saw some clips of the Manning cast with Peyton and Eli, and they had Matt Ryan on there as well, covering the game. And they were talking during that last sequence there, that last drive for Kirk, and they were talking about how, when you're in a new offense, you're in a new scheme, you're not totally used to the players that you're throwing to, it's usually a lot easier to run the offense in 2 minutes when you're in hurry up, because the play calls are typically the things, they're your baseline plays. They're the plays that you installed the first week of training camp and have been running every week since. They're the no brain calls. They're the ones you don't think about. They're the and then you get into that rhythm where you don't have a second to stop and think, right? So you're just go, and it's less thinking and more just relying on your instincts as a quarterback. And you really saw, I feel like you really saw that with Kirk, because in that 2 minute drill, he just looked like a totally different quarterback than he's looked the first game plus.
Are you guys pro Manning cast or regular? Because I watched that too. I heard that as well. I prefer the Manning cast.
I like to watch the retail broadcast, but I always get the highlight clips after the fact on like TikTok and stuff.
Yeah, that's I think they have the right idea with the Manning cast of like doing a more casual broadcast where like it's just kind of like two guys talking about the game, but it's just it's not focused on the game enough for me. Like they just talk about.
I find it a little distracting.
Yeah, which is like, I get it. And that definitely has its place. But for me, I would rather something a little more focused on the actual game.
That's fair.
All right, guys. Anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here for the night?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. All right. So next week, we're going to be talking about evaluating your squad right now to decide if it's time for a rebuild. I know that I've got a couple of teams that I was on the fence about in the offseason, wasn't quite sure how they were going to do. And through the first couple of weeks of the season, it's becoming very apparent that they're not going to do very well. And and if we've got another showing in week 3 like we had in weeks 1 and 2, it's definitely going to be time to start planning the rebuild. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about some guys that maybe we want to trade for that are at the bottom of people's depth charts that we want to stash for the future, or maybe as high-level handcuffs. And then, as always, we'll be giving our start of the week to close out the show. Until then, I hope everybody has a great night and good luck in your fantasy week. I hope everybody wins unless you're going against me. See ya.
I think we're playing each other.
Are we?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. All right, then. It's go time. See you guys.
Have a
See
good
you
one.